Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. Let's go. Let's laugh. We are imperfect after all.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Us podcast.
I'm Leanne Camilleri.
And I'm Lisa Downs. As hosts of the Imperfect Us podcast, we share relatable stories that celebrate we are all perfectly imperfect humans, leading perfectly imperfect lives. We discover practical and evidence-based strategies that draw on the science of well-being and positive psychology that help us to uncover the barriers that might hold us back from being our authentic selves and turn them into opportunities so that we can show up more consistently, doing what we really aspire to do and who we want to be.
We acknowledge the Wadawurrung and the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the beautiful lands on which this podcast is being recorded. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to other First Nations people who are here with us today. So, let's get started. Today we're learning from Linda Murphy. Linda is a speech language pathologist and relationship development intervention consultant and has been working with individuals with social learning differences for over 30 years. Along with numerous articles, Linda has authored the Declarative Language and Co-Regulation Handbooks. Linda is dedicated to helping individuals and families using a positive, thoughtful communication style that emphasises understanding, patience, respect, and kindness. We're really looking forward to learning from Linda today. So let's dive on in. Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'd really love to know what led you to the work that you do in declarative language.
So I am a speech language pathologist, and maybe 7 years into my career as a speech language pathologist, I became an RDI consultant, which just stands for Relationship Development Intervention, which is a parent coaching program to support individuals to develop dynamic communication, just using natural routines, natural relationships, natural communication. And during that training and just in the RDI community is where I learned about declarative language as a supportive communication approach for individuals with social learning differences. And it is a strategy and a tool that I hadn't learned about prior to that as a speech language pathologist. Yet it was so powerful that I couldn't believe that it was not better known. And that kind of began my journey, just using it and wanting to educate other people on its power and also just how easy it is to incorporate. You know, you don't need to be a therapist. You don't need to go to school to learn how to communicate in a declarative way. So that has always been important to me too, just to show others how this tool is really accessible to anybody who wants to learn about it.
And it really is quite an amazing addition to the communication that is already happening in schools as well as within the speech therapy. And we've seen a lot of amazing changes in our behaviour of our students because of it. So we're really keen and would love for you to help us to understand a little bit more about what actually is declarative language, and I guess how it works a little bit for you.
So essentially, if we think about communication as a whole, when we communicate, there's communication that is supportive, inviting, offers information to the person that we're with. And then there's communication that may place demands on the person that we're with. So if we think about language or communication that might be demand-based, it could be what I call in the book imperative language or imperative communication. And it's where you give a very specific demand or command in the moment, such as stand up, sit down, throw that away, put on your shoes. So it's just language that places a very discrete demand on the other person. Another form of communication that can place demands is question asking. Questions can be relationship or can support relationship building. Questions can be about experience sharing, but questions can also place demands because when you ask someone a question, immediately in that moment, they have to come up with an answer. And the demand increases, for example, when there's a right or wrong answer to that question, or the demand can increase based on the language formulation that might be needed in that moment to answer the question. So those are all demand-based communication forms. Declarative language is the opposite, where it's just commenting and offering information without expecting anything in return, where it's really and truly just thinking about giving information, sharing information openly with the person that I am with, without having that underlying demand present also. So an example might be, you might say, oh, put on your shoes, would be the imperative. And the declarative might be something like, I see your shoes over there. Or I'm wondering if you'd like to put your shoes on. So it's just things that, it's communication that's invitational in the moment. It's helping a person maybe notice things in their environment, maybe recall aspects of their routine that they might need to do next. But it just has that different emotional tone where we're supporting rather than demanding. And essentially what happens with a lot of our individuals who might have social learning differences is when they feel that demand, it can create anxiety, it can create the fight, flight, freeze response. Some kids, or adults for that matter, just really respond to any demand-based communication. And so when you use declarative language and really think about communicating in this other way that's invitational and supportive, it changes that underlying dynamic, and stress decreases for the person that we're with, and they can be more open to the information that we're sharing in the moment.
I love that. And I think that invitational one really allows have more agency in what they're doing and learn the skills of being more independent rather than being told, and having that feeling of that fight, freeze sometimes. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was easy to understand as well. And how interesting for me as a teacher is the question asked. We talk about asking questions all the time to gather information, but I hadn't really realised that I could also put that barrier in as opposed to declarative language, which is fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. That's a really good way of explaining it. Thank you.
Yeah, the other piece too is it offers that agency or autonomy. So although it might be time to put on our shoes, when we just say, oh, I noticed your shoes, and then we pause, we give space for that student or that child to take the initiative independently.
And from the wellbeing science perspective, we know and understand that autonomy is a key ingredient to human flourishing. Linda, how does making small shifts in the language that we use impact our communication outcomes?
If I just go to the examples before of demand-based communication versus invitational, or communication that creates space for autonomy, the shifts really happen on that foundational level, where initially what we do is we're just really changing the dynamic of the communication landscape from something maybe that has been negative, maybe it has consisted of power struggles, maybe the student or the child shuts down or withdraws rather than engages because they're protecting themselves from demands that they are unsure of. And so when we change to this invitational style, it just creates more openness. It creates a more positive communicative landscape. And then what happens is that the two people who are communicating stay connected for longer periods of time. Or if it's a student, for example, they trust that they can engage without fear of a demand that they may not feel equipped to handle. And that's really at the heart of it, is we want our students to feel comfortable engaging. And so for some students, it's really important for us to be mindful of the demands that we place so that they feel safe, sustaining engagement, so that together we can learn and grow.
And I wish your book was around when I was parenting young kids.
I think that would be every parent's thought.
My children are now adults. But having said that, after reading your book, I was playing with the language, just catching myself out in some of the language that I use, and I'm still practicing. But just directing the young person's attention away from an outcome where we might otherwise have a tantrum or something like that. It's a fabulous way to communicate and get the actions that we're after.
And I think to add to what you said, I think for me, that's always one of the most powerful things is it's not about what we can get the student to do or get the child to do. Like this change comes fully from within ourselves, and we have the power within ourselves to make a change if we want to. And I think that can be scary because then you have to own it and know that the change is on you to like think about or get started with. But it's also really empowering.
Oh, Linda, that was amazing in the fact that the shifts can happen within the language change that we have as parents as well. And I think that's such an important thing. So with that in mind, thinking about decorative language is very effective when paired with co-regulation strategies. Are you able to help us understand a little bit about why this is true?
Yes. So the way that let me back up. So I wrote Declarative Language Handbook. I also learned about co-regulation through the RDI community. And after Declarative Language Handbook was out there and I was receiving follow-up questions about what to do when it doesn't work, in my head, I was like, then you just pull in co-regulation. But I hadn't really talked about co-regulation in Declarative Language Handbook. So that's why I very quickly then wrote Co-Regulation Handbook, because they're just two tools that I don't ever not use together. And the way that I think about it is declarative language is a way of speaking, but co-regulation is a way of being. So declarative language helps us know what to say in each moment, but co-regulation helps us know what to do or how to be. And essentially for me, co-regulation is very much being present in the moment to the person, to understand that however I might respond in each moment is going to depend on the communication just prior, or what someone has communicated to me. I'm going to communicate in direct response to that. So it's a contingent flow that unfolds, but not in a way that either person is controlling it or that it's entirely predictable. But we really have to get this sync. So as I bring these two concepts together, I might make a declarative statement, but then it's on me to pause in that moment and attune to the person that I'm with or the student that I'm supporting, so that I know whether they received what I said, so I know how they received it, so that I know what to do or what to say or how to communicate next. So sometimes it might be that I notice them thinking through their nonverbal communication, and that tells me I just need to be quiet. Or perhaps I can tell from their response they didn't quite understand what I said, which means I need to scaffold a little bit more to support their comprehension. So it could be anything like that. But the point is that I just can't move ahead in the exchange until I pause in that moment and observe, which is the co-regulation piece.
Oh, I love that. That reminds me of a little concept that I heard a little while ago about serve and return. And I was just thinking about when you were talking about making sure you're noticing all of those things and the language and how you might need to respond depending on what you're observing. And I was just thinking that's like the serve. So you're serving the invitation and you're watching and responding, and then you're able to return depending on what it is that's going to be appropriate for what you're noticing. That is invaluable. And there's many times, I think we just chatted before about sometimes when we're talking about parenting and we're frustrated, we want to get our kids out the door and we're trying to rush them and we're giving stress to them and then they're becoming stressed. When you're changing that lens of communication with them, you can actually have a better outcome. And if you're responding and is seeing what's happening to yourself, but also how the other person's responding, it gives you more opportunity to pause, like you said, and have a bit more of a think about perhaps what the next communication piece might be and how to make it much more invitational rather than that real demand and stress. And I love that of the co-regulation and the declarative language together. Makes perfect sense, and I can't believe we haven't used that together more often. Thank you so much for that, Linda.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one more thing, because this is another way that I started to think about it, is that the two of them together support social information processing across social learning styles, or support processing of information and attunement across social learning styles. So I think especially when you're with an individual maybe who has a different social learning style than you do. So for example, I'm not autistic, but I'm working with individuals who are autistic or neurodivergent. Like I just know that our processing systems are different and we need help making sure that we are connecting or thinking in the same way. So again, it's that declarative language and co-regulation that helps us slow down and really tune into each other.
Yeah, it actually brings that curiosity in, doesn't it, as well, where you're actually showing by being curious about how they process and what's being said and really noticing. You're getting a deeper understanding of those humans and how that's connecting and how you can support better. I just love that. It's just such a way more productive and engaging than the demand phase. Yeah.
Right.
It's something that I'm learning about, and it's still very much in the learning process. But you touched on it in your book, and that's pathological demand.
Yeah.
And I can see how structuring our communication style in that space would be bring about a very different result.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, so for example, those supporting have definitely found my book and found it supportive. And as I'm learning more about PDA, there's even nuances to declarative language that are really important for that community. For example, I think when I think about using declarative language and co-regulation with a PD individual, my priority is to help that person feel safe so that their anxiety decreases. So I think they experience a lot of anxiety. So I'm going to use declarative language to provide information really transparently to them, to help them feel safe, to decrease their anxiety, to strengthen the trust and build our relationship together. I do know that when you use declarative language that might be more inferential, that can be uncomfortable to PDA individuals because they may feel that there's an underlying demand there. So for example, if I were to say, oh, I notice your shoes over there, a PDA individual might perceive that as a demand, a hidden demand. Oh, you're just saying that because you want me to get your shoes. And to them, it might feel manipulative. So that's the type of declarative language that I think is not helpful to them. So you may instead want to use declarative language such, I notice your shoes are over there. It's almost time to go. I'm curious if you help putting on your shoes. I think it's important to wear shoes so that you don't step on anything sharp outside. So I know that's a lot of language, but really what we're doing is we're not hiding any of our thoughts. We're being really transparent. And we're also always providing the rationale, which can be really important for them. Like, I know you want me to wear my shoes, but why? And it really helps them to understand the why.
That's so true. I had a very tricky year a few years ago, and we had a very late diagnosis of PDA. And I had a PDA, we had two autistic children, very different, and managing how they needed to have that communication shared was really tricky. But what I really enjoyed was more the declarative language with the PDA student, and it was about the why. So you just didn't do the first invitation, you had to do the invitation and the why. As soon as you had the why, it was like, oh, breath of fresh air.
Yeah, again, like this can be a shift for us as people maybe who grew up in communities where just do what I say because why do I have to explain everything? But really, I think if we as the educators and the support people out there understand that the why is essential and that really and truly helps them, then maybe it helps us make that shift.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you're in the long run, and it will save time if you just give the why on the front end rather than create a power struggle around not giving it.
Yeah.
Linda, as people hear this conversation, they might be thinking, when might we use declarative language? And is it just as effective in workplaces as it is in education?
So I think it's effective everywhere because I think once you make the shift and you feel it, you realize that it's just powerful and effective communication. And at the heart of it is nobody can read each other's minds. Like we can make guesses about what we think other people are thinking, but sometimes we get it wrong. And declarative language is just about sharing your thoughts and being transparent for the most part, which just leads to more effective communication overall. And again, it's not confrontational. So that's going to be helpful in the home environment. That's going to be helpful in education settings and going to be helpful in workplaces. And I guess even to add to that, I do have some neurodivergent folks who work alongside me at my practice, my private practice, and they are even the ones that are able to help me understand or articulate in a different level, like why it's so helpful. And I think it might do things, for example, like help that individual decode a social context that is moving really quickly or is dynamic. Or it might help them decode in a moment what another person is thinking without having to guess. So it just makes information in a dynamic environment much more accessible.
And, in that perspective, less draining for that individual.
That's totally true. Yes. So it supports their overall capacity because there's not that additional cognitive load of having to figure everything out, but rather I'm just going to give you the information so that you can understand what you're seeing. So I'm a speech therapist and we do a lot of peer groups in our practice, just supporting kids to be kids. But things move really quickly as they do with kids. You put two kids together and then three or more, and things happen really quickly. And the people that work alongside me know how to support kids once we're in it. But I might notice something that they didn't see. And if I can just narrate what I see, it helps everybody read each other's intentions a little bit better or be curious about each other's intentions or to notice something that might be helpful to an individual. And it's not that they couldn't do it, but it's just information can move really fast. And anybody can miss information at any moment. So the more we're there helping each other out, I think it helps the kids that we're with.
And I think sometimes you don't see what you don't see. So when someone else reflects that back, you go, oh, I hadn't noticed that. So it's always a learning in it, especially those group ones for students to know that they're part of common humanity as well. So that it's not just them on their own or they're different from everybody else. In actual fact, all humans have struggle sometimes with peer things, and just learning together means that they get more ideas and insights as to what they might do next in a situation like that again, or something that's similar, or perhaps they've all had one and they can share that. Really love the invitational part to it, Linda. I think your Declarative Language Handbook is by far one of the best books that I've also read for a very long time.
Yeah, if I can add one other piece that we haven't talked about that just in talking about groups of kids together reminded me is sometimes too it's just about sharing memories. So for example, if I'm supporting a child and I notice that something is important to them because I know them and have a relationship with them, but someone that they're just meeting doesn't know that, and they might perceive their communication as negative or impulsive or something, then I can get there in that moment and say, oh, you don't know this about so, but I remember animals are their favorite toy. And it's not that they don't want to play with you. They just probably really want to use that cat that you're holding because that's one of their favorites. Might it be okay if you take turns or something like that? So it's even my declarative language can help connect the dots across time. And that's also where just the relationship is really important because communication is never discrete. It comes with a past, it comes with a present, it comes with a future. And the more that we can use declarative language to connect the dots over time, that also helps people be better understood.
Yeah, I love that. We would really love to hear how we might start to use the declarative language. So for anyone who is listening today that just hasn't had any experience with it, what would be some of the things that you might suggest?
So I think if it's a new style for you, one of the first things you can do is just listen to yourself for a day or two. Maybe even before you put pressure on yourself to do anything different, just really listen and notice how often do I ask questions? How often do I use imperative communication? How often do I place demands? just to give a sense of your own baseline and be curious about yourself. And then I always say, just start one exchange at a time when you have the bandwidth and the time and space to do it. Because as we talked about, a really important partner to declarative language is co-regulation and just slowing down. So you can be present in the moment to the person that you're with. That's where that co-regulation comes in. And if we feel as though we're in a rush or we have a really strong agenda that we have to get to, then that's going to get in the way of our ability to slow down, pause, notice the person's response to our communication. So I say just start at a time that you don't feel any of those external pressures on yourself. And you can just think about one exchange at a time. So it could be maybe you're driving in the car and you're just having a back and forth exchange with your child, and you can just concentrate on commenting and then pausing after to see how they might respond. Or if it's a relaxing time for you, for example, at bedtime with your child where you're looking at a book together, like that could be a nice time. But I would just find that time in your day or your week where you don't feel the external pressure to speed up. And it's really okay if it's just like 5 or 10 minutes to start, or just one exchange to start, because it's just get practiced in what it feels like, how it feels different, even to notice the difference in the way the person that you're with might respond. And I always say just like little moments build up over time, because as you see, it reinforces that it's a positive thing to do, which starts creating that habit of communicating in a different way.
Yeah. That's such a nice way of starting something new, is just being curious and having a go and wondering and noticing, because really you're not fail at anything. It's more, how does this work for me? And I really like what you mentioned about really listening and noticing about yourself, what you say, because sometimes that can be a really big insight to, oh my goodness, any wonder they don't listen to me, because actually that's not what I'm meant to be doing. So yeah, thank you so much. That's a really wonderful, I think our listeners will love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Linda, in addition to your amazing books, which we'll be sharing in the show notes, do you have a favourite book, podcast, or TED Talk that might be of value to our listeners today?
So I know my brain right now is in a lot of the neurodiversity affirming field, just to ensure that I'm always evolving my communication to the best of my ability as I listen to autistic or neurodivergent voices. So if I were to defer to some of those, I really Tilt as a podcast, Learn, Play, Thrive as a website with a lot of great neurodiversity affirming learning opportunities. I love Kelly Mauler's work on interoception. I think that's really valuable. So those are some of my go-tos. Barry Prezant, I always look to him. So his book, Uniquely Human, and his podcast also. So those are.
Wow, thank you so much. And I'm sure our listeners will be very grateful for those.
Can I give you a couple more?
Yeah, go for it.
I think if you go to PDA North America, there's really great resources there on PDA. A lot of them are free or low cost, just from parenting and communication approaches to adulting as PDAers. There's great information there. And the other thing I think is really important is if you do, for example, work with autistic individuals, just to also be mindful of non-speaking individuals and presuming competence. I know, like initially, people might not understand how or if declarative language will work with individuals who are non-speaking or AC users, but it very much does. And a book that I just really moved me is Edo and Autism Land by Edo Kadar. And I think if anybody is curious about non-speaking individuals, that could be a great book to read and helps you shift towards presuming competence for AAC users or non-speaking individuals.
And I really like that that's shifting the perspective of competence, or presuming the competence. I think that's wonderful. We've got to treat our little people with humanness and common humanity. Getting towards the end of our conversation, which I don't really want to be at the end yet, but anyway, so we, as every guest that we have on, our special guests, we always like to share a wellbeing strategy or a practice that you feel might be a game changer for yourself, or something that you've just been through that really lights you up. We're just wondering, what's your favourite wellbeing practice that you might have that you would love to share with our listeners today?
So most recently, as I have been swimming with one of my sons, we do laps a few times a week now. So it's our shared exercise together. And I feel like that's a nice time where I can't look at email or my computer or listen to something. I just have to be present myself in the pool alongside my son, which is special too.
Almost a double wellbeing practice. So you not only have the swimming, the physical mindset for yourself, but you've also got that beautiful connection with your son, which brings lots and lots of wonderful hormones rushing around your body. Love it. Thank you for that.
Linda, thank you so much for our wonderful conversation today. If our listeners want to connect with you and learn more about your amazing work, where will they find you?
So my best website is declarativelanguage.com. That has my most recent resources, which include handouts, blog posts, recordings. I'll put a link to this on there as well. Trainings that are coming up. So that's the best place. And so that's the website. And then there's links for social media. If people are Instagram followers or are on Facebook, you can find me there as well.
It was such a pleasure having a conversation with you, Linda. And I hope that we can come back at another time and continue this conversation, because I think it's something that I think needs to be spread everywhere in the world for the greater good of all of our people, regardless of whether it's a parent or students or workplace colleagues. If we can make a difference for everybody and calm the world down a little bit, I think we're in a really good space.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated the opportunity to meet with you both and talk about things that I love to talk about, and hang out in Australia for a little bit.
You are welcome, and we've really loved learning from you. So thank you so much. What a great conversation, Lisa.
I really loved it. I actually was looking forward to it for a couple of days. So I'm really pleased that we did. I think there's so many highlights for me in this one. And I think I've known for a little while about the demand, how much when you demand style of communication really puts a barrier up between people. Yeah. But the questioning and asking questions really threw me initially, but now I understand why. That sometimes by asking questions all the time means that it's demanding an answer. And so I hadn't thought of that. So that declarative language for me is a real inspiration in that more invitational, giving people more autonomy and independence and agency in what they might need to do and coming to the decision themselves rather than being told. Like that for me was a really big insight and aha moment.
I agree. Autonomy is something that I wrote down a bit throughout this conversation. And I think as we learn in the science of wellbeing, autonomy is a powerful way to help us.
That's that human flourish, isn't it?
Yeah, autonomy helps us to thrive and empowers us to thrive. And I think also she mentioned it's a language that builds trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's powerful as well. In work that I have done with young people, I have found that trying to get the language right, or getting the language right, should I say, changes the outcome. So getting the language right or changing the language that we use changes the outcome.
And I think that was definitely powerful. And I think one of the things from all of that by changing the language, we're really wanting that outcome of engagement without the fear. So any conversation that we have, you want to be able to engage with people that has a beautiful flow to it. And there isn't any of that fear of, oh, what do I have to say this? Do I have to just answer their question and just tell them what they want to hear? Well, actually, no, I want to be able to have that beautiful conversation that has no fear in it. And that enables us, both of us, whoever it is in the conversation, to have that serve and return sort of conversation. And then it sustains engagement because the trust is there. And the emotions are not so dictated or that fear-based. I think that's just brilliant.
Yeah, and as Linda said, it's connecting the dots, helping to connect the dots, especially from that PDA perspective, connecting the dots from the past, present, and into the future. I think that was something that a key learning that I took from that as well.
Absolutely. And one of the benefits I think that I will take with me from today is that marrying the decorative language and the co-regulation together, because as she mentioned, Linda was saying that the decorative language is a way of speaking, but the co-regulation is a way of being. And when you can have the speaking and the way of being joining together, really builds that opportunity for them to have more success in whatever it might be, and the communication and the emotional rest and pause rather than that fight, flight or freeze.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye for now. Bye.
And thank you for listening to the Imperfect Us podcast. As always, we are extremely grateful to our executive producer, Brenton Ainsworth, for helping us to put this episode together. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone you care about, and we would be grateful if you could rate this podcast on iTunes. To continue the conversation and see what we're up to, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Just search for Imperfect Us. Bye for now.